So we're entering into the month of Av. And we all know that the beginning of the month of Av is the 9 days, which culminates on Tisha B'Av, the day that we mourn the destruction of the first and second Beis Hamikdash, the first and second temples. And then a few days later, 6 days later, is the 15th day of Av, Chamisha Asar B'Av, which the Gemara says, the Talmud says, was the greatest holiday of the year. So we once drew a parallel between the summer months and the winter months. And in the summer months, there are the first 3 months of the spring, and then the 3 summer months, and the same thing also in the winter months, is the first months of the fall, the first 3 months of fall, and then the months of winter. So the parallel of Av is the month of Shvat. And Shvat literally means a rod, which represents a stick, some din, restriction. And just like at Shvat, there is the 15th day of Shvat, Tu B'Shvat, and that represents a changing point within the month of Shvat. The same thing also in Av, that there is the first 15 days of Av, which represents one reality, and then the next 15 days of Av, which represents another reality. So the first 15 days is a time that we mourn destruction, and it's a time that we're not only mourning the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, the temples that have been destroyed in the past, but we're mourning the destruction of the temples that are occurring in the present moment, and all the destructions that we are experiencing throughout our lives. Anything that's negative and destructive and sad, we mourn in this period of time. And then the 15th day of the month, everything switches from a time of mourning to a time of great celebration. And the 15th day of the month is exactly 40 days before the 25th day of Elul. And the 25th day of Elul is what? Is a time of creation. So the Talmud says that Abayim Yoim Kodim Yitzeres Avlad, 40 days before the conception, the formation of a child, there's a voice that comes up and says, Pliny, Lebas Pliny, this child, which is referring to a male, is destined to marry and be in a relationship with Bas Pliny, the daughter of so-and-so. And that's the first time the zivug, the first time a match is called out in heaven, is 40 days before the formation of a child. What is 40 days before the formation of a child? That's the moment of conception. We're not talking about preconception. So the moment of conception, according to halacha, it takes 40 days for a child from the moment it's conceived till it becomes an actual child, 40 days. Before 40 days, it's considered mayim b'alma. A fetus is considered as water. And once 40 days occurs, is a time of transformation. We know this in the Torah that 40 is always a time of transformation, like in the Mabul. So when there's a 40 days transformation, that's when the child becomes considered a independent being. So 40 days before that, which is the moment of conception, that's when it says, a voice comes out and says, this person will marry this person. If we use this on a cosmic level, the conception of creation, the creation itself, which is the formation of the child, occurs on the 25th day of Elul, but 40 days prior, which is the moment of conception, occurs on the 15th day of Av. And since in the Talmud there's a debate whether we count creation from Nisan or creation from Tishrei, right? There are two opinions when the world was created. Either the world was created in Nisan or the world was created in Tishrei, either the first month or the 7th month. So 40 days before that represents the moment of conception. That's the first glimmer in Hashem's eyes of creation, that Hashem desires to have a relationship with an other, with creation. And that occurs 40 days before the actual creation itself. That's why it's a time of relationships. So on one hand, we're mourning destruction. Destruction, obviously, in terms of our relationship with Hashem, represents the opposite of a healthy relationship, which is that we're not if we're not listening. It creates a strife and a separation. And on the other hand, we're saying that the entire month is connected with relationships and with the sense of hearing. So we have to understand a little bit, what is this idea of hearing? What is the capacity of hearing? And how does hearing help us have relationships? Simply, the idea of destruction is when there's no communication, and when there's a proper relationship, it occurs when there is communication. But we have to understand this a little bit deeper. So let's try to unpack a little bit what's going on in the month of Av. So let's start off. The first thing that we have in the month is the letter formation of the Yud Kei Vav Kei. The letter formation of the Yud Kei Vav Kei in this month is Hey Vav, then Yud Hey. Hey Vav Yud Hey. You'll notice that obviously Hey Vav is the opposite order of Vav Hey, which is the second part of the formation of the letters. And Yud Hey is the correct formation of the letters. So instead of having Yud Hey and then a Vav and a Hey, which would be the natural sequence of the letters, you have Hey Vav and then Yud Hey. Yud Hey is, in Hebrew, what is the number? Yud is 10, Hey is 5. So Yud Kei represents the 15th. From the 15th day of the month, which means from the mid-month, Chamish Asar B'Av, from the 15th day of the month, the sequence of the order of the letters is Yud Kei, which is that it's a natural order. The sequence of the first part of the month is the opposite, is the reverse. We spoke about this many times, that when there's a formation of a letters, of a word, in its correct formation, the Arizal explains that every month there's 4 letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei, and every month has a certain sequence of that Yud Kei Vav Kei. Like for example, Nisan is Yud and the Hey and then the Vav and Hey, because that's a natural order. That's why it represents the time of the miraculous. Any other month, you take these 4 letters and they're formed in a different way. So in this month, the formation of the letters is Hey Vav and then Yud Hey. Okay, so the Hey Vav is the opposite of its natural flow. The Yud Kei is the natural flow, which means if you divide them in 2, you'll say that the first part of the month, the Hey Vav, which represents the first part of the month, is negative. That's up until the 15th time of the month. And then when the moon becomes complete, when the 15th day of the month, when the moon becomes complete, which means when everything becomes revealed, then it's revealed that the sequence is correct, the correct order. So the next 15 days, the next Yud and Hey, 15 days will be in the correct sequence. That's why Av is not a completely a negative month, but half of it represents a time of negativity, and half of it represents a time of possibility. In truth, we're going to have to understand this. In truth, there is nothing really that's negative in the world. Everything that's negative has a potential for positive. So when we talk about destruction, and we say that the first part of the month represents the mourning of the temples, we have to understand how that is actually a positive quality, how we can transform that and use that negativity for something that's positive. But we're just going through the sequence of these letters, that the first part of the month represents negative, the second part, Yud Kei, represents the positive. That's the transformation of Hey Vav, negative, into Yud Kei, which is positive. Okay. The Tikkun Zohar writes that the verse that's connected with this month is Hine Yad Hashem Haya, which refers to, this is very unusual in terms of its sequence, so that is very unusual. It's Hey Vav Yud Hey, that's the actual sequence of the letters. We always use sequence of letters related to certain verses where you find the verse where it appears are in the first letters of the verse or the end letters of the verse that repair that formation. But here, according to the Tikkun Zohar, you actually find it within the verse itself, the word itself. It's also the way we actually pronounce the Yud Kei Vav Kei. The way Yud Kei Vav Kei is pronounced is Havaya, right? Existence, and Havia. Havia is Hey Vav Yud Hey. That's the way we translate it. So, but the Mishnah Chassidim writes that the verse related to the month is Haskes Ushma Shema Yisrael. Haskes Ushma Yisrael Hayom. That there's a verse that says Haskes means to be quiet. There's translated here, to be quiet, Ushma, and to listen, Israel, today. That the idea of the sequence of the month is connected with the sense of hearing. Nothing is really understood yet. We're just trying to go through some of the ideas, then we'll understand what's going on. So we have the, first of all, sequence of the months, and it's related to a verse that's connected with the sense of hearing. The letter, according to Sefer Yetzirah, that connects to this month, is the letter Tes. So in the letter Tes, we have something very interesting. The letter Tes is the least common letter in the Torah. If you look through the Torah, you'll see that the letter Tes appears the least of all letters in the Torah. Yet, Tes also refers to good, because the first time we find the letter Tes in the Torah written as a word is Tov. We spoke about this many times, that if you want to know what a letter represents, we have to see what that letter, where that letter first appears in the Torah as a first letter of a word. So the first time the letter Tes appears in the Torah, with regards to a word, is the letter Tov. So Tes means good. And the Talmud, also the Gemara, says that a person that sees the letter Tes in a dream, it's a good sign. According to the Zohar, the shape of the letter Tes is directed inwards, referring to goodness that is within. If you take the letter Tes, if you look at the graphic design of the letter Tes, it's shaped inward, right? It's like pointing into itself. So it represents a goodness that is hidden. It's a hidden goodness. This is similar to a womb, which is also carrying a child, and it's hidden in the mother's womb for 9 months, which is 9, is the letter Tes, and then eventually it's revealed. So Tes, there's something about the quality of the month of Av, that it has good, has potential for good, and yet, even though it has good, the way we commemorate the month of Av is mourning. For half of the month, we commemorate all the mourning and destructions. So we're talking about a good, but a good that is hidden and eventually become revealed. Like we said, the difference between the moon, the way it exists in the first 15 days of the month, is that before it reaches the 15th day of the month, the moon is concealed and it's not fully revealed. And the 15th day of the month, it becomes revealed what was occurring in the first 15 days. There are 3 ways. Well, generally it's discussed as 2 ways, but we're going to reveal a 3rd way and to understand how this works in terms of hearing. There are 2 ways the way people relate to other people. Very general. Let's say, for example, you're sitting on a chair, right? What's your relationship with the chair that you're sitting on? The relationship with you and inanimate objects is functional. Okay, so we'll call it an it. It's an object. Okay, this is one relationship. And this can be also in terms of a relationship with another person. There are certain people that you have in your life that the only function that they have in your life is for a certain utility. Maybe you need their money because they're roommates, or maybe, I don't know, what else do people need each other for company, but you're not really relating to the other person as a real individual person. The reason why you have this relationship with the other person, it's a function, right? Just like you sit in a chair, you have a friend. The friend is basically an it. This is one way you relate. This is obviously, I'm not saying this is a positive thing, but this is the way certain people relate to people as objects. Then there's another relationship, which is a more evolved relationship that we have, and they usually occur with inanimate objects. Some people are obviously psychologically need some help, have the same relationship with inanimate object the same way, is that you have a relationship with a human being, which is an I and a thou, which means, or I and a you, that recognition that the other person, you're having a relationship with that person, is not an it, it's not an object, but the other person is also a person. And therefore they have desires, and they have wants, and they have understandings. So let's say if your relationship is an I-it, let's say your relationship with your parents is an I-it, yeah? So then the function of your parents is basically to support you, to give you money, to pay your rent. I don't know what else parents do for this age, girls, but this is the function of your parents. You basically have no relationship with them. You call them up every time you need money or you need some other thing. That's an it. It's basically like a chair or a table, and that's your relationship that you have with your parents. Then there's another relationship which goes a little bit deeper, that you recognize that the other person is also an individual person. They also have desires. They also have wants, and they also are a human being. So you're sympathetic to their understanding, that the other is really an other. You're experiencing the other. Now this can be very extreme, that you have so much a relationship with the other that it's no longer an it, which is the utility about me, but it becomes completely about the other person. That you lose your identity and it completely becomes about the other. Let's say, in Mitzvah Hashem, everyone will fall in love, and this is the month that everyone's going to fall in love, right? Amen, amen. So you fall in love with somebody, so you fall head over heels, you're completely enamored by this person, your relationship with that other person is completely another, and you're completely overwhelmed with that other individual person. So there are 2 ways how to relate to people. This one is a relationship that occurs in an I and an it, and one is a relationship that occurs in I and a thou, or I and a you. The higher form of relationship is not I it, not I thou, but we'll call it I. What is I? The I relationship is that it's not only an object that serves a certain utility, it's not only a person that you're in love with and you care about, but there's a sense that you and the other person are part of the same. Okay? That's a higher level of relationship. So normally a relationship, again, I would say most times that people have friends or acquaintances, it's usually I it. Let's be honest, it's usually just a functionality, it's a certain utility, you need them for this and for that and the other thing. The moment you don't need them, they're done with. Sadly, this is the way most people relate to other people. Then there are sometimes you have a relationship with I thou, that is a recognition that the other person is another, and you're having a relationship with them. And then there's a relationship which is an I. That it's no longer about me or you, but we sort of morph into one, and there's a recognition that you and the other person are an extension of one. Okay? So in terms of hearing, according to the Sefer Yetzirah, the month of Av is related to the sense of hearing. Listening. So we're going to define listening. We're going to define listening as the 10 levels that a person can listen to another person. When you say you're listening to someone, you're hearing them, this can be experienced on 10 levels. And we finally understand the 10th level, which is the highest level of hearing, we'll understand why this month is connected with Mashiach and redemption and overcoming all destruction. So let's go through these 10 levels quickly. They're obviously, it's not Torah Messina exactly these 10 levels, but you can divide them in 10. So the first thing when you listen to somebody is called passive ignoring. Passive ignoring basically means that you're just ignoring them. You're not like consciously ignoring them, but your mind is completely wandering somewhere else. The person's having a conversation with you. I don't even know if this can be considered a level. But you're having a conversation with someone, your mind is completely wandering someplace else. You're ignoring them. Okay, that's one way of listening. And then there's active ignoring. Passive ignoring is you're just ignoring because your mind is wandering. It's not like you didn't have an intentional choice that you're saying, okay, I'm having this conversation with this person. They're completely uninteresting to me, and therefore I'm going to start thinking about something else. It's just the person's not interested, and your mind keeps on wondering something that you feel more interested in. So it's passive. It's not a conscious choice that you're ignoring the other person. Active ignoring is a person's having a conversation with you, and you choose not to hear what they're saying, which is not necessarily a negative thing at all times. Let's say a person is talking to you lashon hara, or a person is talking to you nonsense. So you actively ignore them. You say, okay, listen, I'm tuning out. I'm not going to listen to what they're saying. So these are two levels of listening, passive ignoring and active ignoring. The next level, the third level, is pretending. Pretending to listen is not that you're ignoring the other person, but you're pretending. And I think you're really putting on a really good show even to yourself. You're fooling yourself. You're actually pretending that you're listening, and you're listening, but you actually you're not going to remember a word the person said after the conversation is over. Because you want to be a good friend to the other person, so the person's talking to you. You don't want to ignore them. They're going to realize that you're ignoring them, so you're shaking your head, and you're participating in the conversation. And you are listening. At this point, you're actually listening, but nothing is registering. So this is a pretending level. The next level is, I'm sure all of you have done this at some point in your life. I know girls study like this a lot because I have a daughter, which is recording. Basically, you take down notes, and the teacher teaches, and everyone writes 1,000 notes. You record everything, you remember everything, and nothing registers. You get 100 on your test, and the next day it's a blank slate. No information registered. Why? Because you recorded everything. It's like a copy machine, or like a recorder. You recorded everything, but nothing really entered into your mind. The information that you're hearing is not really important to you. You don't really care about it, but you can remember everything. You ever had a student, I don't know, some of you teach, you're teaching, and one kid seems like he's completely not interested, or she's not interested, and you say, could you repeat? And the kid repeats word for word exactly what you said, but you know the kid didn't hear a word you said, because they have a very good memory, and they can remember everything, so they just repeat what they said, but they don't remember anything. That's a level of recording. Okay, next level, projecting. Projecting is that when you're having a conversation with somebody, okay, here we're already starting to enter more into intimate forms of hearing, because here you're really participating in this conversation. But pretending is a level that you're listening to what is being told to you. I'm sorry, projecting is a listening to what you're listening to what is being said, but you have an agenda before you enter into this conversation. This is the way most people hear anyways. When you're having a conversation with somebody, or even when you're sitting right now and you're listening, there's a certain little recorder, a certain little image, a certain little tape that's going on in your head that has certain ideas and certain associations of ideas. And when you hear something, you're right away projecting this, oh, this is exactly what I heard. Right? This is the way we hear information most times, because we're listening, we're not open to really listen to what the other person's saying. We're participating, and we are actually listening, but when we're listening, there's always an us, a very strong sense of you that's projecting what you're thinking, and therefore that's what affects what you're hearing. So let's say, for example, three people are having a conversation, and they're talking. Then one person leaves, and they say, did you hear what the other person said? So one person says, this is what the other person said, and the other person says, no, this is what they said. Right? Because both of these people were not really listening to what the other person was saying. They were projecting while they're saying. They have the image of what they want to hear. So therefore, they're looking for that type of information. So whatever the person says, that's what they're going to hear. Right? Your ego is very much involved in this process of projecting. So projecting is you want to hear listen, a lot of times, let's say you go to a lecture or you read a book, it can be anything, and there's a certain preconceived idea about what you're going to hear from this person. Right? So when you're going to read this book or hear this person already, you're going to say, oh, yeah, it could be the person didn't say that, but you already came with certain expectations of what you're going to hear, and therefore you're projecting on this conversation of what's being heard. But again, you're not really listening to the other person. You're not really hearing what they have to say. There's a higher level of this type of projecting, which is manipulating. Then not only are you projecting what you want to hear, but you actually end up manipulating the conversation to hear exactly what you want to make that person say exactly what you want to hear. Right? You know what I'm talking about. You're having a conversation with somebody. You have an agenda. And again, it could be a subconscious thing. It's not a conscious thing. But when you're hearing the person say, oh, so this is what you're trying to say. Oh, you're saying this. Really, the person in the beginning did not say that. But eventually, you're a good manipulator that you eventually get the person to say exactly what you want to say, what you want to hear. So you're projecting and then manipulating the other person to hear, to say those words that you want to hear. Another level. 7th level, hearing. Okay, this is when you actually hear the other person. That when you're listening to them, it's not about projecting, you're not manipulating, you're not just recording, but you're really in tune to the other person. You're listening to exactly what they're saying. You're hearing what they have to say. But this level of hearing is not sympathetic. You're not sympathizing with them. You're not identifying with them. You're just hearing what they have to say. When someone tells you something or unburdens themselves to you, it's not just that they want to be heard. Then it's not just that they want you to hear them, but they also want you to have sympathy for them or some type of connection, saying that, yes, I feel the pain that you're having. Not just I hear what you're having to say. So the first spiritual level of hearing is that you're present for the other person, completely present for the other person. You're not projecting, you're not manipulating, you're not just recording. You're really present, you're really listening to what the other person is saying. And then on a more evolved level, not only are you listening to the other person, what they have to say, but you're also sympathetic to what they're saying. So you're starting to identify with them. You're saying, okay, when I really hear what you're saying, I really feel your pain. I really understand where you're coming from. It can be for something positive as well, not just necessarily something that's negative. Right? We usually think that friendship, in terms of hearing, it has to do with negative. If someone's really in pain, you hear the other person. But even sharing the person's joy. There's a famous story of a Hasidic rabbi that was once in a bar. Now the question is, what is a Hasidic rabbi doing in a bar? Okay, that's another question. But the Hasidic rabbi, Moshe Lev Sasov, or the Rav Shasar, was sitting in a bar, and he heard two Russian peasants talking to each other. One person said, you know, brother, I love you. You're like my brother. I really love you. And he says, you know, truth is, every time you go through something painful, every time you have something that's hard, I feel your pain, I'm completely sympathetic, and I love you like a brother. So the other person told him, it's true that I believe that you really feel my pain, but do you feel also my joy? Could you really feel my joy? And the Rav said that when he heard that, he understood that's really the definition of true friendship. Because when someone's going through a hard time, I hate to say this, but when someone's going through a hard time and you're there for them, there's some part of you, very, very subconscious, quiet part of you that's really very happy to be there for the friend that's going through something that's harder. Because in a way, you're feeling better about your own life by knowing how miserable the other person's life is. I'm not saying this is a conscious thing you're doing, but you're very sympathetic to them, but on some level you say, okay, this guy, I'm very sympathetic to you, but at least I'm not going through your problem. But what happens if another person's going through something very joyful that you don't have that joy in your life? Could you really be there for that person? So this is sympathy, not only sympathy and empathetic, to really be there for the other person and really hear them. Not only hear the other person when they're going through something that's troubling, something that's harmful, something that's hurtful, but even to be for that person in that person's joy. This is another level of hearing. A higher level of hearing is empowering. Up until this point, there's still a separation between you and the person that you're listening to. You're hearing the other person. In the first levels, which is just recording and other things like that, there's completely no relationship between you and the other. And these higher levels is a sympathetic relationship between you and the other person, but there's still a strong divide between you and the other. There's you that's listening to this person, and there's a person that's talking. The higher level is empowering, which when you listen to somebody, the mere fact of listening to them empowers them to make choices and to do things in their life that will change the reality that's negative for them. So when you hear somebody, that a person has trouble, you should speak to your friend. The speaking about something, besides unburdening yourself from this pain, and the other person receives that, that's just being sympathetic. If the person truly identifies with you in what you're hearing, you also give them strength to find, and the courage to find the tools that would allow them to overcome their troubles. Just by hearing. This is a very much deeper level of hearing, that you're hearing the other person, and the mere act of hearing empowers them to overcome their things that they're challenged by. Here, there's already a melding of these two people, between the listener and the speaker. The speaker and the listener are becoming one. And the person that's hearing, now there's a symbiotic relationship. Not only are you receiving from the other person this information, you're not only hearing from the other person, but now you're actually giving to the other person. But then there's even a higher level. This is what it talks about in terms of a yechidus, of a real high level of encounter between two people, that one person listens to the other person, and not only do they empower them to find their own tools within themselves that can bring about whatever they need to forever the tikkun that they need, but they can give of themselves. They identify so fully with the other person's problem that they assume the other person's problem as their own. You're listening, you're hearing the other person so deeply that you're hearing the problem as your own problem, and therefore you have koiches, you have certain potentials that the other person doesn't have, but by identifying so much with that problem that there becomes a unity between you and the other person, your potentials are now given over to the other person. So you give them something that they didn't have to begin with. In the ninth level, right, you're sympathizing with them and you're listening to them, and by hearing them, you give them the potential to reveal what they have in their own capacity. On the 10th level, which is the highest level, is not only that you're giving them what they can receive on their own, but you're giving something that they don't have. Because now you and the other person are completely one. And that's the highest level of hearing. And this we can have in any, of course these are very high madrigas, very high levels, but the truth is that in any type of encounter that we have with somebody, we can always choose either we're just pretending, ignoring, or we're sympathetic, or really identifying with the other person. If you really want to help somebody, it's not only do you have to listen and you have to hear, but you have to sympathize You have to empower, and you have to recognize that we're all one. And that's the level of the I. So the I-it, let's try to finish. The I-it, the relationship between you and the other person is that you are one, the other person's an it, it's an object. And what's your relationship with the other person? Okay, let's say the person's telling you your problem, his problems or her problems. You're not really interested in, you tune out, you're ignoring them, you're pretending, you're recording, you're just not really present. Then you have a relationship which is an I thou. You really feel the other person's pain, you feel the other person's joy. So when the person listens, you're really present for them. And the helping for them is just by the fact that they unburden themselves. And then the deeper level is, and you feel sympathetic for them, and they feel like they have a sympathetic ear, that they can speak exactly what's troubling them. But then the higher level is that it's no longer an I, it, and it's no longer an I, thou. It's no longer an object, and it's no longer another person. But there's a recognition that we're all part of one. Like Dr. Rebbe writes in Tanya, that really we're all part of one. So when another person has a problem, and the other person is speaking to you, their problem is not their problem, it's your problem. There's a Gemara that says, "Hamaspalo bat chaver, v'hu tzarich leise davar, hu nenat chila." I don't know if you ever heard this teaching that someone says that Hamaspalo bat chaver, if you pray for a friend of yours, v'hu tzarich leise davar, and you need the thing the same way, then hu nenat chila, you receive first answer. Let's say, for example, you need a shidduch, your friend needs a shidduch. Hamaspalo bat chaver, if you pray for your friend that needs a shidduch, v'hu tzarich leise davar, v'hi tzarich leise davar, and you need the same thing, hu nenat chila, you'll be answered first. Right? It's obvious this is a trick. You might as well just pray for everything that you need. You find the person that needs the same thing and pray for them, so you have all your answers prayed. Right? It's a very simple solution. Okay, so they could also be read like this: Hamaspal bat chaver, someone that prays for somebody else. V'hu tzarich leise davar, and he needs it, that's the Gemara, he or she needs it for herself. Meaning, when you pray for somebody else for their needs, you also need that. But when you pray for them, it's as if you need it. If there's a lack by your friend, if someone's missing something, it's not only that you're missing it and they're missing it, and now you're praying for them, but their lack is your lack. If something's missing by a friend of yours, and you feel that their needs are your needs, you need the same. You need the solution to that problem, not for your problem, for their problem. But you feel that it's your need, that their needs are your needs, then hu nenat chila, of course you're answered. Because that's being a true friend. But it's the highest level of true friendship, because you were saying that the other person's needs are your needs. When the other person's friends are your needs, and when you're listening to somebody, and when you hear the other person speaking and telling you something, and that listening to the other person is listening to the other them as if it's your problem, then not only do you empower them, but you give something over to them that they don't have. And that's the higher level of relationship. There's a teaching by the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem writes that every letter contains within it Olamas, Neshamas, and Elikus. Olamas is worlds. Neshamas, in other ways, in other versions, it's souls or malachim, angels, and Elikus is divinity. Okay, so we're going to map this out. You're familiar with the four universes? Asiya, Yitzira, Bria, and Atzilas. Every experience that we have in life, we can have four perspectives. When we talk about the universes of Asiya, Yitzira, Bria, Atzilas, we're not talking about abstract universes that's somewhere outside of space. We're talking about perspectives. Everything has four perspectives. There's a perspective of Olam Asiya, of the physical. There's a perspective of the Olam Yitzira, a perspective of Olam Bria, and there's a perspective of Olam Atzilas. Let's try to translate this into practical language. Let's remember these four phrases. This is Olam, which is universe, Olamos, which is universes, Malachim, which is angels, and Elikus, which is divinity. Okay? World, worlds, or universe, universes, angels, and divinity. These are four perspectives. Let's try to understand this. Let's say you're walking down the street This is just an example. This happens at every moment in every type of experience. You're walking down the street and someone shouts something negatively against you. You've never met this person. You're walking down, not here. You're walking down on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. You're walking down the street. Someone passes you by and says you're ugly. Okay? That's it. But with a very serious face. This man is with a suit and tie. Looks very interesting, very put together. For some reason, walk by and says, by the way, you're extremely ugly, and walks further. Okay? You just had a very strange encounter with this person, and the guy just walks off. So you have here now 4 perspectives. Perspective number 1 is Olam. Okay? What is Olam? Universe, singular. The word Olam comes from the word Helam, which is concealment. There's a singular event. This person said you're ugly. That's it, you know. You don't know who the person is, why the person said it, where the person's going. You have no understanding of anything. You just see and heard this person saying you're ugly. If you have a very immature consciousness, you take the words as is, and you feel bad about yourself. Why does someone call me ugly? Maybe I am ugly. You start thinking about this, right? You're going through this whole problem. Your experience is this negative, and you don't see anything larger than the event itself. I gave you an example of walking down the street and someone telling you something, but this can happen to anything. You walk out of your house and you trip, and you fall, and you hurt yourself. If you experience just the fall without anything attached to it, just the event itself, that's a concealment. What would be not a concealment? Let's say if you're walking down the street, we'll give the same example. You're walking down the street, and someone says something harmful to you, and then you say, what a silly person, probably either the guy's psychologically wrong, mentally retarded, or maybe the guy has a very bad day, he probably meant the person behind me, he's talking to himself, right? There's a whole other story. So the person says these words, but the moment you can expand the narrative to expand beyond that story, all of a sudden it's not so painful. Let's say a child sees a 100-year-old person passing away, right? For a child, a 100-year-old person passing away and a 3-year-old person passing away, God forbid, is the same thing. They don't understand the story, just understand the immediate event. Someone passes away, it's a tragedy. For an older person, it says, oh, well, this person lived a full life, and they were 100 years old, and they were this and that and the other, and therefore, they end their life, they were very happy to move on to the next life. So the moment you expand a narrative from the immediate to have olamais, universes, meaning interconnectedness between other things, then it's less painful. You walk out of your house and you slip and you trip, and then you say, oh, because I didn't clean the ice yesterday, and there was ice on the floor, and the reason why I didn't clean the ice yesterday because I was doing something that was very important to me. Okay, so that's the fault. That's, it's my fault. Next time I'll clean the ice, and next time I won't trip. But if you've tripped and you don't understand why you tripped, let's say a child that trips doesn't understand why, it's much more painful than an adult that understands the backstory. So the difference between a negative experience and a little less negative experience is how much that story expands. If it's olam, if it's asiya, then it's immediate. If an experience is immediate, you see the vessel. You see just what's presented to you. And if it's harmful or hurtful, that's it. You don't understand why. Right? It's just pain. If you understand that this pain gains you pleasure, or this is a process, or this comes from somewhere, then you can receive it. What is neshamas? What is malachim? The third level is when you experience something and you say, what is the metaphysical reason why this thing is occurring? In other words, you slip. Someone told you something. What's the message? Why is Hashem showing me this message at this time? Nothing is random. If someone tells me while I'm walking down the street that I'm ugly, yes, it's true that the person needs therapy and they shouldn't be walking around telling this to people and that something's lacking with them. However, I receive that information. What's that information trying to teach me? Maybe I'm not looking at people positively. Maybe I think people are ugly. I don't know. So what is that teaching me? You're following? So the moment you're experiencing something and you're saying, what's the lesson? What's the wisdom? What do I gain from this? Then it starts expanding larger. That's the hashgacha part of it. Gamzu l'toiva, this is also for the good. What's the purpose? Now, it doesn't mean that everything in life you're going to understand. And now most of the experience that you have are going to feel very much olam, right? It's going to feel that just the concealment. Why is this happening? I don't know why. I don't know why it comes from. I don't understand the lesson. However, if you have certain times in your life that you can look back and say, oh, you know, the reason why this happened, even though when it was occurring, I didn't know why it was happening. But when I look back, I say, this brought me to this place, and this brought me to another understanding. Then I can say, even though I'm going through something that's negative now, based on my prior understanding of events, I know that the same thing will work out this time. So not that you know every single thing that happens in your life, what's the message, but you just know that there is a message, that there's something Hashem is talking to you at this present moment. When you talk about being in the now, there's a big mistake. People talk about being in the now. Most people, when they say being in the now, it's actually a very unspiritual thing. Being in the now, when a person says, okay, I don't care about the future, I don't care about the past, I just want to be present in the moment, therefore I'm going to eat like a chazer. Yeah, I'm going to be in the now. I'm just going to do whatever I want to be right in this present moment. That's not a spiritually elevated level. That's when you're cutting off the present from the past and the future. You're saying there is no past, there is no future. Correct. Now, really being in the now is being in the internal moment, which includes both the past and the future. It's very different, right? If I say I'm living in the now that's cut off from a past or a future, then that's like living in the future or living in the past. It's the same idea, right? It's in the present that's cut off from the past and cut off from the future. It's just like being in the future that's cut off from the present. You didn't get anything. You just substituted being in the future, which most people are in the future, right? Or many people are in the past. This is the way people live. That you live in your past, who you were and how you were, and you live in that place of the past. Or people just imagine themselves in the future, and very few people are present. So it comes along this new era, and everyone's saying, okay, you have to live in the present moment. But people are just substituting, instead of being in the past or in the future, they're doing the same thing with the present. They're saying the present has nothing to do with the past or the future. So I can just be a chazer and just eat whatever I want and do whatever I want because I'm in the present. That's not the present. That's the present the way it's just like a past or a future. It's another dimension of time. But if you say that the true dimension of the eternal present is the eternal present that includes past and future, right? It includes everything.